Welcome to a somewhat different series of Unconventional. This time around, we are at GRIMMFEST for an online interview special. GRIMMFEST is an annual horror film festival based in Manchester, showing some of the scariest horror movies and creepiest short films of that year. So, thanks for tuning in. Over to you, Kieran.
Thanks for that, Fran. This time round, I'm going to be speaking with Chad Ferran, the director of The Deep Ones, based on the H.P. Lovecraft characters of the same name. In this film, we are introduced to a cult that worships the god Dagon, and a couple that get dragged into this cult's nefarious devices. Let's see how it goes, and jump straight into it. All right, so question number one. I usually like to ask people what the inspiration behind the film was, but with yours, it's clearly Lovecraftian. So the question I have for you is, with such a huge Necronomicon of creatures to choose from, why go with Dagon and the Deep Ones?
Well, it all kind of started with the location. And one of the main actors, Gina, she had this house that she had in Ventura, and basically it's a beach house. She sent me some pictures. She said, hey, here's a little bit of money. What can we make with this? And she wanted to do a cheap slasher film, and I'm like, I'm not interested in that. But seeing the whole ocean and the house and all that stuff, it spurred the whole thing of a cult film. Because I always wanted to do like a Run from the Devil kind of cult, idea kind of thing. And it just kind of clicked, and I'm like, oh, Lovecraft, let's do a Lovecraft cult, let's do this. So it all kind of basically started with the location, and that kind of spurred the idea. And then, I reread up on some more of the Shadow in Innsmouth and Call of Cthulhu to kind of refresh my mind with some of the more Lovecraft stuff and intertwined that into the story, and it was born. They all based really on the location of what we had and the money we had, and try to make something that, we only had like 3 days for the effects cost wise. So it was like, once the creature was made, it was only 1 day to shoot that creature out and get it. So it was kind of, the budget limits everything. And it was trying to basically make something that utilizes some great Lovecraft creatures and the tentacles and stuff in a limited number of days and in that location, and make it all seem bigger than it really was, which hopefully it was successful.
There's a point in the film where a couple of the characters actually come across one of Lovecraft's books, and there's reference to the Necronomicon, which straight away made me think, oh, hang on, this isn't set in Lovecraft's universe. This is a universe in which Lovecraft actually existed. What was the reason behind that sort of meta decision with it? Because of course there are cults based around Lovecraft's work today, but what made you decide to go down that meta route?
Well, it was basically because the idea that this cult, a lot of these cults that you read about or whatever, you all think it's hooey and a bunch of crap, and then this is kind of one of those things of maybe it's not crap. And there's people who actually believe this, and they've summoned this, these creatures and these deep ones, and these, and this Lovecraft idea was his own writings were based on a reality, and they follow this reality, and then the characters in the film find out, oh, maybe this reality is true. And it was just kind of a simpler thing of setting it in this time zone, this era, and that was kind of just how it all came about. For me, it's all about, when I start a script, it flows, and sometimes it clicks, sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But for me, it just kind of fit in that way of, here's a cult that believes in Lovecraft and these writings because they're just amazing. And what if those writings are actually a reality? And these alternate universes and these cults and these creatures and these things do exist within this, within these writings, back in the 20s or whatever it might be that he wrote. And it was real stuff. for these characters, and they kind of fell into it and were giving birth to Deep One.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are the theories out there that Lovecraft was writing what was coming to him in these awful nightmares he was having, and that maybe it was all real and that kind of thing. So, there's got to be some foundation for these cults that are around.
Yeah, you never know. Some people, might have this, like this sixth sense or whatever it is, or they're able to see into the future. They wake up in a dream or it's a premonition and it comes true and all these kind of things. So maybe in a sense that is what he was seeing, and hope, which would be pretty amazing. We all have a Cthulhu out there in the ocean that's going to, get us if we stray too far from the shore.
Now, obviously, the inspiration from Lovecraft is very obvious throughout the film, but I couldn't help but notice a certain link, an almost homage to movies like Rosemary's Baby in terms of the climax of the film, the cult elements of it. Was that something that you did knowingly, and if
oh
so,
yeah, that was basically the main inspiration. It was kind of, let's make Lovecraft meets Rosemary's Baby with this whole, you couldn't have any inspiration of without the Polanski element in there, because to me that was what it started with. It was first the Lovecraft cult idea, and then Rosemary's Baby, because it was we had this main actress. She had an actor she had in mind to play her husband, so it was kind of, it wrote the script around those things and the ideas of what we had, and I just kind of, Polanski's one of my heroes, so it was kind of pull that into it and, kind of follow that whole thing. I mean, we even went with the same Zeiss prime lenses that they had used on Rosemary's Baby, I think it was 18 millimeter and a 25, to kind of give it this subtle consistency throughout the imagery, the same way Rosemary's Baby did, whether it's, so it was trying to kind of fall into those same things that they did, and, not that we could even come close to, to anything Polanski's done, but the idea was to kind of follow his same kind of setups that he used in Rosemary's Baby, and that was exciting, but at the same time scary that, if someone picks up on that. And the same thing with the Lovecraft stuff. If you muck it up, they're kind of like, oh, you messed up, these icons of horror. And so that's a fear that I get worried about stepping in with people watch it. And they're like, oh, they said this wrong, or they, that's an obvious rip of Rosemary's Baby or The Tenant or whatever it might be.
Like I said, though, I would say it's more of a taking inspiration type homage than an actual rip, because there's definitely enough original in your concept to say that it's not a rip off. And there's that age-old saying that there are no original ideas anymore. So the best we can do is take inspiration from something and try to add to that.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So you said that you'd read up on a few of the related Lovecraftian novels. I don't know if you've read any more of Lovecraft stuff.
No. Dunwich Horror was another one that I pulled a little bit of stuff from. Rewatched a few of the films like Die Monster Die, and what's the other one, Color Out of Space, which things like that. And there was a great show actually, Hammer House of Horror. Remember that show? There was an episode that had this cult, and it had a very Lovecraftian thing where there was a looking mirror, a looking glass, and they had the hypnotism, and I pulled things from that, so it kind of gave it this. There were numerous things that you're writing something or getting it in gear to film something, and then that was great, or that was great. So it was kind of pulling things from not only Lovecraft but other things that had probably pulled inspiration from Lovecraft stories into the little films or TV shows or whatever it would be, and kind of intertwine that all into things. So when someone had seen it and they're like, oh, you took the hypnotism from Get Out, and I'm like, no, it was from an episode of Hammer's House of Horror. So, things like that where unnecessary, or Brian Usna's Society, or things like that you kind of call from your childhood memories or whatever it is and pull it into things.
So let's imagine that things like budget, time constraints, none of that's an issue.
Right.
Which of Lovecraft's creatures that you know of do you think is the most terrifying and that you'd love to bring to the silver screen?
Probably Cthulhu. You know, it's just an amazing thing when you know, especially when they're out on the boat and they see him for the first time. You know, there's things that hit you, you know, from that story that stick in your head, or when you know the sailor goes insane and he's in, you know, Amsterdam or whatever. You know, there's certain elements that are like, oh, that would look amazing, you know, on the screen, especially the different locales with it in it that are pretty amazing, and the creature itself is just amazing. And I had recently seen that underwater that had.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I'm like, it came out of nowhere, and you're like, holy shit, that's Cthulhu. That's pretty amazing.
And then you realize that all the other creatures must have been deep ones, and
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, that was,
it did kind of come out of nowhere.
yeah. No, and if they would have advertised it as that, I would have, you know, wanted to see it in the theater.
I went back and watched the trailer, like, after I saw the film, and was like, yeah, no, this just seemed like a standard kind of disaster film, but underwater.
Right. No, they hit it, which is crazy. That would have been, you think, their main selling point.
Yeah, you would think. So, do you think if you did do a Cthulhu film, you'd go down that sort of route, or would you actually like to try and recreate the Call of Cthulhu based on?
Yeah, no, I'd like to follow it as it is. I think, you know, if especially if you don't have any budget constraints, then, you know, I'd stick to what he's got.
I mean, it's done well in video games, tabletop, and that kind of thing.
Sure.
Why not?
It can be done, especially if you got the money.
Okay. So my final question from my list is whether or not there was anything, especially as you've said that you had these budget and these time constraints. Was there anything that you wish you could have done but you were unable to? Maybe a scene that was in the original draft that just couldn't happen, or something like that?
Well, there was a scene in the original draft. The whole scene of her running on the beach is a full, you know, 5 minutes of her actually is running and running and running, being chased. Then she's caught, brought up to the cult, raped by the creature. I mean, it was a whole bookend of what happens at the end to the Alex character happened in the beginning with Sylvia's character. And it was just too much. It was too, it gave too much away. It was too extreme. You can't, you know, have this monster rape within the first, you know, 10 minutes of a film and kind of bring the audience down to kind of settle in and, you know, pull into the movie. So it just kind of threw everything off. So the other idea was to shoot a scene of her writing the letter and, you know, running out the door. And there was a, you know, a thing to kind of build up a big suspense piece in the opening that was kind of on the fence of shooting and on the, you know, of doing, but it kind of fell apart. So it's one of those things of, should we have done, you'll never know unless you actually just did it and cut it and put it in and tried it. But the idea that, oh, how would that be if we had that in there? Would it add or would it take away? You know, it's one of those unknowns that after a while you're kind of like, I don't care. Let's see how the audience react to it. If the audience loves it, thinks it's great, success. If they think it stinks, and then it's like, maybe we should have added that to make the audience, you know, a creep out factor kind of thing in the opening. But there's something that, you know, it's still, I love the idea of here's a naked chick running down the beach right in the opening and the credits, and it pulls it in nicely without being too gratuitous. As before, it was just right on. Here's, you know, a pair of tits coming at you.
I personally think that it worked because for me, for much of the film, I kind of thought, okay, is this a film where we're actually going to see monsters popping up out of the ocean, or is this some guy, is this Russell who's got this wine that makes everyone very suggestible, doing his whole hypnosis act,
Right.
And then, you know, at the end when we do see Dagon, then obviously it becomes a lot clearer because she hasn't been having any of this wacky wine. Right. So I do think that you made the right choice there in not having the exact bookend at the beginning. Good. Because it still left me guessing what's going on here.
No, and I think it keeps you in longer because I think having that much at the front end, it would turn numerous people off, whether, they just walk out or they, just tune out and are not able to reconnect to a mystery within the film and watch it till its end, which, love it or hate it, I think that's the best thing. If you can make someone sit through an entire thing and then they can either shit on it or they can praise it, is an accomplishment in itself, because there's so much stuff on TV today or the movies or that you watch 5 minutes of and you're like, I'm done. I can't even get through this. So I think, love it or hate it, if you can get all the way to the end, I think that in this day and age is an accomplishment cinematically.
So now you've done Lovecraft, are there any other sci-fi or horror writers that you'd like to have a crack at bringing to the big screen?
Ooh, Colin, I have trouble with his last name. He did a book called The Mind Parasites that is really interesting, and I think it was the same writer. Yeah, he did Life Force. Is it original?
I've just looked up Mind Parasites, and that's what came up.
Yeah, Mind Parasites is a book I remember reading and getting really, really digging it. So I guess that would be something, if the opportunity arose, that would be something to dig into, because it hasn't been done, so it would be interesting to try.
No, all right.
Or more Lovecraft, like you said.
Or more Lovecraft, yeah. Can't go wrong with a bit more Lovecraft.
Can't go wrong with it, because nobody's really doing it. That's the thing. Not direct, features of it. So
there's a lot of stuff inspired by Lovecraft, but not a lot of actual Lovecraft.
Right. And with all this racism crap today, it's a perfect time to take it and do it, because no one wants to touch it.
Yeah. All right, well, that's all my questions, so thank you very much. If you have anything you'd like to say to the audience, then please go ahead.
I just hope the audience digs it, and I hope to make more, and see you again.
Great. Well, thank you very much for speaking with me.
Well, thank you.
And enjoy the rest of GRIMMFEST.
You too. Bye.
Bye.